We're with Kevin Annett, who is the acting secretary of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Alfred. Thanks for having me again. Yeah, I was in Europe during May, and it was very encouraging because what came out of this, I went to Holland, through France, and then into Italy, and then back through Ireland. And in all of those countries, I received invitations to come and speak, but in two of them, in Holland and Italy, we actually formed new groups affiliated with our tribunal, with the ITCCS. And one of those groups in Italy, called Rete Labuso, led by a man called Francesco Zanardi, agreed to host an international conference in Genoa, Italy on September 20th. And that conference is very significant because for the first time it's going to unite groups from so far 6 countries that are determined to force a political response to the whole situation now where the Vatican is basically being absolved of its crimes. The government of Italy is protecting a former pope, Joseph Ratzinger, who's hiding out, evading justice in the Vatican. And, it's especially being prompted by a decision of the International Criminal Court this week in which they are not following through on a case against Ratzinger that was brought by abuse survivors in America. And they basically have said they don't have the evidence or the jurisdiction to try the Pope. We think that that's a sign that the ICC is actually colluding with the Vatican to evade justice. And now it's up to citizens themselves to bring that direct pressure to bear on governments and the Vatican. So the trip was a way to solidify that and make contact with those who really want to heighten up the struggle again. And I was very gratified by the response we got and how much this issue now is being talked about all over the world.
Right. Now, there was a development at the level of the International Criminal Court, the ICC. And that development is that it was announced that they're not going to follow through on the potential case against the former Pope, Joseph Ratzinger. And I believe that the groups there had filed over 22,000 exhibits. Could you comment on that fully? Just give how the case got there, what the background is, what the outcome is, and how that impacts on your work.
Well, it was a case that started, I believe, at least 3 years ago, brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York, who was hired by a group called SNAP in America, which unites survivors of abuse by priests. And SNAP and the CCR applied to the ICC, to the International Criminal Court, for a ruling by one of their officers. In this case, I believe he was a former judge who's working for the ICC criminal division, asked for a ruling whether or not Ratzinger could be tried under international law for signing letters ordering bishops in America and Ireland not to cooperate with police in investigations into child rapists, and also for actively shielding and protecting child rapists, including his own brother in Munich. Now, what was very odd about the ICC decision was they rejected the application this last week on 2 grounds. First, that they didn't have the jurisdiction to bring in that kind of ruling against a, quote, head of state. Secondly, that they didn't have the evidence. And as you mentioned, 22,000 exhibits showing the personal complicity of Joseph Ratzinger in not just obstructing justice, but asking citizens of other countries to commit treason, to violate the laws of their own land in order to protect basically the coffers of the Church of Rome. And so it's confusing why an ICC official would apparently collude with the Vatican in evading justice, because there's certainly enough evidence to bring a case by any measure, but also this claim of not having the jurisdiction, it doesn't jive with international law, which says, yes, heads of state can be tried for in this case, clearly criminal activity. And also, in the case, for example, the Canadian Parliament or the Parliament of England has the power to put Queen Elizabeth on trial if she commits a felony or, is even suspected of committing a crime. So it's a bogus argument to say that they didn't have the jurisdiction, and why they would be so blatantly, colluding in helping the Vatican, I think is anybody's guess. But clearly, it shows that those kind of mainstream top-down approaches don't work, because whether it's Vatican money or influence through Catholic politicians, we know that there's of the people around President Obama. There's over 20 who are Jesuit trained. Most of the Supreme Court justices are Catholics. In America. So I mean, the influence extends widely, especially now with the present Pope being a Jesuit himself. And all of that, I think, had to do with the ICC decision. So it kind of reinforces our resolve to make this a political and a popular issue, so people can bring a lot more pressure to bear to bring these people to trial.
Now, in this case, the former Pope Ratzinger is a former head of state, and the ICC specializes in prosecuting and trying former heads of state. So doesn't that bring up even more cognitive dissonance here?
Well, exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because that's even causes one to wonder, well, there's even less of a reason for them to have turned that down. Obviously, there's reasons that they're not saying, because they look ridiculous with that kind of ruling. Now, don't forget, of course, that under the Lateran Treaty between the Italian government and the Vatican, the government of Italy is obligated legally to defend the Vatican. Now, whether the ICC doesn't want to step on the toes of the Italian government, whether it is simply a question of the Vatican's influence, who knows? But we do have grounds to say that for all those reasons, the ICC is in clear violation of their mandate, and it has lost a lot of, I think, credibility because of that decision.
Now, could you share with our audience just a bit about the history of the Lateran Treaty and what exactly it is, and from your visits to Italy and the conversations that you've had, what you see as its future now that you're opening up the activities of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State in Italy?
Right. Well, the Lateran Treaty was brought in with an agreement between the former dictator Mussolini and the Pope at the time in 1929. And basically what it did, it had reestablished the Vatican as on a totally different level than it existed before. It was actually abolished in 1870 during the so-called Risorgimento, or the reunification of Italy under Garibaldi. The Papal States were disestablished in 1870. Actually, September 20th, which is one of the reasons we're holding our conference on that date in Genoa, because to remind people that this is about disestablishing the Vatican as a power, not simply reforming it. But anyway, the Risorgimento disestablished the Vatican between 1870 and 1929. When Mussolini took over for political reasons, he not only reestablished the Vatican and gave it status as a state, but established the Vatican Bank with $250 million lira, which he handed to the Vatican as compensation for 59 years of not having legal status in Italy. And a part of that was this so-called Lateran Treaty, which was simply a treaty between, not even a treaty because it doesn't qualify for the definitions of a treaty under international law. It was a private agreement between a government of Italy that was overthrown in 1945 and the Papacy. And it allowed for the Catholic religion to be the sole religion in Italy, to receive massive compensation, including still almost €1 billion every year directly from Italian taxpayers, and required that the Italian government unconditionally support the position of the Church of Rome, including, for example, today in Italy, and this is kind of mind-boggling for people who are used to this notion of separation of church and state. When there's a case in an Italian court involving any employee of the church, the Catholic Church, the local Catholic bishop has to be consulted by the judge in his final rendering of a verdict. So, in fact, the courts aren't independent in Italy. They're arms of the church. And that shows you one of the consequences. Now, of this Lateran Treaty. But the question is, why wasn't the Lateran Treaty disestablished automatically when the fascist government was overthrown in 1945, when Mussolini was strung up and a new election brought in a different government? Well, the short answer is the Allied governments, and especially the United States government, colluded in maintaining the Lateran Treaty as a way to maintain what was in effect the world's first effective fascist power, which was the corporate entity known as the Vatican. For political reasons, because after the World War II, it looked like the left wing was going to take over in Italy. And in fact, the first decision of the National Security Council in America, NSC document number 1, was for the sabotage of the Italian elections to make sure the Communist and Socialist coalition didn't get in. The Christian Democrats were elected because the Catholic Church threatened to excommunicate anyone who voted communist or socialist. So that was a kind of a Cold War decision. The U.S. helped to really establish continue the Lateran Treaty and the sacrosanct power of the Church of Rome. So we're talking Cold War politics, geopolitics here. It isn't just that politicians in Italy are Catholics and want to protect their buddies. It's bigger than that. And the U.S. collusion with all of this has been consistent right along, including with the Obama administration.
You brought up the issue of September 20th and a press conference that you have in Genoa with a number of groups.
Well, when on May 23rd, I did a press conference in Savona, Italy, with Francesco Zanardi of this group Rete Lebuso in Italy. Francesco is an amazing man. He struggled in the wilderness for many years as a survivor of child rape by a Catholic priest. The man who protected that priest and who covered up that incident, Cardinal Calcagno, is now a fairly senior official in the Vatican Bank. So when Francesco went to Vatican Square and protested, he was instantly arrested by the Vatican police while the Italian police stood by and watched, because Francesco's stepping on some pretty big toes of these senior cardinals. And as a result, he's very isolated. He's harassed and followed by the police everywhere in Italy. We felt it our duty to come and support him. And at that press conference, we announced that we need to unite other groups to come to Italy to really go to the heart of the beast and confront the Catholic Church on its own turf. And so the decision was made. We put out the call to have groups come to Genoa on September 20th. And Genoa is important because I was actually endorsed by the city council of Genoa in 2009 when I came and spoke there about the genocide of Native people in Canada. But the province of Liguria, surrounding Genoa, actually endorsed our work as well. They were the first government body in the world to endorse the ITCCS. So it's a very kind of positive place to hold this stuff. We so far have groups from Canada, America, England, Ireland, France, Holland, and Italy that have all agreed to take part in this conference. We're going to hold a press conference on September 20th, and then we're all going down to Rome, to Vatican Square, to hold a protest and press conference and kind of a spiritual convergence that day on Sunday, September 22nd. And we want to ask groups all over the world to take part in that kind of time of fasting and prayer and concentrating our energy on supporting this campaign to disestablish the power of the Church of Rome and to make sure that these crimes against children stop, at the source. So we're looking forward to groups so far in 19 countries that have promised to be part of those 3 historic days between September 20th and 22nd.
Now, as part of the Lateran Treaty that you were just speaking about, I may be mistaken, but I believe that it may be a criminal offense in Italy still to speak out publicly against the church. So are these acts and these processes of the International Tribunal, which you have taken under international law in other countries like Canada, the UK, Ireland, are they in Italy going to be permitted to go forward, or will you be charged with civil disobedience by going forward there.
I hope we are charged with civil disobedience because, like with as Martin Luther King and everyone learned during the '60s, that's exactly how you change the system, by exposing the unjust laws, by creating a nonviolent confrontation right in the heart of the system, so that you appeal to the conscience of the world, and in this case, Italians. You know, when I was in Savona at that press conference, it was interesting. We went into a local cafe, and when Francesco was talking to the cafe owner, who he knows, he's this old guy, and as soon as the cafe owner heard what we're doing, he rushed over, he shook my hand, and he said, "I want your autograph, and I'm going to pin it up on the wall because we want to honor men like you who take on this evil church." Now that's right in the, you know, in a traditionally kind of very Catholic area of Italy. There's a lot of awareness there of the problem, but people are waiting for somebody to break the ice. We rely on that kind of latent goodwill and consciousness among a lot of people for these kinds of campaigns. So yeah, I hope it does lead to arrests and confronting the authorities on that, asking them why are they colluding with an institution whose written policies to protect and harbor child rapists in its ranks. And, you know, of course, the other thing, too, is that those laws aren't confined to Italy. There's a law right in Canada, Section 176 in the Criminal Code, that makes it an offense to stop a clergyman in his duties. Well, that's one of the things that have allowed child rape to continue. In the United Church of Canada, my former church, there was a regular practice of moving ministers who would rape people around from parish to parish. It's a common practice in Protestant and Catholic churches. That's the point here. And so it's much bigger than simply the issue of the Vatican. But definitely we want to force that confrontation. And one of the ways we're doing that, I should mention something we're doing right away this week. We are circulating a form to all Catholic priests around the world, a duty to comply form. It's being translated into 10 languages. And it basically says, because your law, Crimen Solicitanis, is compelling you to break the laws of your country by violating child protection laws and harboring child rapists, we need you to sign this document that says you will protect children and report issues of child abuse to the police, even if it violates church policy. We've given you 7 days to sign this form that you'll protect children unconditionally. And if you don't, after 7 days, you're going to be declared a public enemy. And you might face banishment in this community because you're a threat to children. You're helping collude in a criminal conspiracy. So we're going to film on this. We're going to film the reaction of priests. And the priests are going to have to choose publicly. Do they serve Rome or do they serve the people and the laws of the land? And that's the kind of creative confrontation we want to create. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be up on YouTube this week. We're going out to churches all over the world on Sunday and over the next few weeks to do that. And that'll be posted on YouTube and at itccs.org.
Well, that's quite a tall order.
As always.
Now, getting back to your action on September 22nd, and you're becoming active in Italy with your joint press conference and action in Genoa on September 20th, which is really coming right up against the Lateran Treaty, installed by a private agreement, public treaty. Either party would try to argue. Yeah. Between the Italy of Benito Mussolini and the Vatican, so far not challenged by any Italian government. We now have, as you mentioned, a new pope, a new Jesuit Pope, Francis I, who is attempting or coming in with a profile of a so-called, quote, reformist, and coming in to sweep things clean and to make this a church of the poor. And he's not sleeping in the papal throne,
I'm sure he's sleeping out. I'm sure he's sleeping out on the street and wearing a hair shirt every day and everything.
Right. But no. But this is a serious question. Yeah. Have you noticed in terms of the issues that you cover, that is liability for war crimes,
Mm-hmm.
crimes against humanity,
Mm-hmm.
genocide, any differences in the reaction of the institution of the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church since the installation of Julio Mario Bergoglio,
Mm-hmm.
Pope Francis I, the first Jesuit pope? Some people say Petrus Romanus, all this,
Mm-hmm.
prophecy stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, what changes have you noticed, if any, since his installation?
Well, verbal changes mostly. I mean, the short answer is no. There has been no comment at all on the fundamental issues. I mean, if they were going to abolish crimen solicitanis, open the secret Vatican archives, arrest all child raping priests and defrock them, um, and take measures to admit the genocide and to start taking serious actions to help people they've harmed, I'd say great. But none of that's happening. There's no indication that he's even addressing those issues. He's addressing cosmetic issues. For example, he said they've formed yet another internal reform commission. We've had those before, where the perpetrator examine themselves and say, let's see, what should we do to improve the image of the church? And that's always the bottom line, not do justice, not listen to and do what the victims want or do what the law requires, but no, do what's going to help the image of the church. That's essentially the extent of reform. The Vatican can't reform itself because these popes are figureheads. The institution is very old, as you know, and is steeped in a whole attitude and legal structure, which requires these crimes to go on. It's right in the ideology of Roman Catholicism that the church is the only legitimate power on the earth, and it supersedes all of the governments, all of the human rights codes, everything. So with a dictatorial system like that, what are you going to expect? That kind of thing that kind of refusal to change is inevitable. And when you look at matters of money, which is what you have to always follow the money, as they say, the Vatican Bank is in serious trouble. One of the reasons there's a Jesuit at the helm right now is because instead of manipulating things in the background, which has traditionally been the way the Jesuits operate, for whatever reason, and we can't know this, but indirectly, it appears that the Jesuits feel they have to take hand here. They have to take direct control over a situation that's really got out of hand financially with the Vatican Bank. The people in Rome tell us that you can't even go into the Vatican Museum anymore and use your debit card. It doesn't operate. They're working on a cash-only basis. I mean, this indicates that there's some serious problems. So I would say that most of this talk of reform is designed to distract and delay, which is what these things usually do. The proof will be not simply what he does or doesn't do, but rather in all the things he's not doing and avoiding talking about, starting with this whole issue of papal laws which protect criminals and, the protecting criminals hiding out in the Vatican, like the former Pope.
Now, what do you see as the ultimate solution for the Catholic Church, which you have described as an institution that is programmed to commit war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, and to which multiple evidentiary documents have been adduced? What do you think is a solution, a public solution, to guard against this institution for the planetary welfare? What do you think it is?
Well, taking away its earthly power and privileges, so that an organization which declares that all people have to belong to it and believe it does, or they'll be destroyed, and that's still the official policy. It's the original genocidal institution in European history, and it still operates according to the same ideology. That kind of institution has declared war against humanity and is a clear and present threat to the welfare of anyone who isn't a Catholic. And it's also a threat to Catholics, to their children in church. That's the thing to realize, that Catholics themselves have a vested interest in helping disestablish the corporate, the financial, the political power of the Church of Rome. Ireland is a perfect example. There's the Association of Catholic Priests in Dublin have met with us. They've already said that they're trying to disestablish the tie between Rome and Ireland, so there can be an independent Irish church which annuls all of these criminal laws and ways of going about things. And so, yeah, we are seeking the ending of all tax exemptions, the ending of all financial concordats between governments and the papacy, which channels taxpayers' money from over 100 countries into the Vatican coffers. We want diplomatic status to end, to expel the papal nuncios from all these countries. We want the Church of Rome to simply be a religious body with no financial or political privileges. And when that happens, then you'll begin to see an equalization and justice possible. Before then, justice is impossible.
Okay, so if our viewers want to review all of the past evidence and proceedings of the International Tribunal into crimes of church and state, and or if they want to keep up with your updates as they occur, or if they want to contact you because they have some evidence or they want to support you or become involved in your work, how can they do all of the above?
Well, you can contact me simply at hiddenfromhistory1, like the number 1, hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com. At our main website, itccs.org, if you go to the masthead, you'll see one of the postings says ICLCJ, which is International Common Law Court of Justice. That's where we have 150 exhibits, video testimonies, documentation, and so on, proving that genocide occurred in Canada at the behest of the Vatican and the Crown of England. And that was the first common law court case that found Ratzinger and various cardinals and Queen Elizabeth and Prime Minister Stephen Harper of Canada, all of them guilty of crimes against humanity, and issued arrest warrants. All of that evidence is up online at itccs.org. HiddenNoLonger.com has a lot of that other evidence, including our documentary film Unrepentant. And I just urge people to get involved in September, especially. We're forming common law court groups in various countries to address these issues in the local communities. We are, like I say, taking action right in churches to compel the priests and the police to get on side with us. And like I say, the events in between September 20th and 22nd. So please do contact us. I'm on again in August through to October, speaking and organizing tour in North America and Europe. Please contact me, hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with our viewers?
Well, I would just say that what we're engaged in now is very historic, very epic, because we're talking not only about the Vatican, but recognizing that we are living under a global system run by psychopathic institutions and those at the helm, and those who operate under their authority have to realize that there's a higher allegiance we have, and that is to natural law, to human rights, to the people of the earth. And so the police and the military and the others who are keeping them in power, they have to look at their allegiance and switch the allegiance. This is what we're talking about when we say justice comes about from the grassroots. And so we're making an appeal to all of the police and judicial agencies in the world to get on side with us in this effort to reassert the common law over the really criminal institutions of canon law and crown law, which allows a small minority to subvert the rights of the majority and even rape and kill their children and get away with it. So this is a call to humanity to join us.
Well, thank you, and we look forward to your coming again to update us on these events as time goes by.
I sure will. Thanks again, as always, Alfred.
Sure.